undefeated. It's opening day. Everybody's shoulder feels okay. Legs are fresh as young ponies at play. And everyone could be MVP on opening day. The uniforms shine, grass is bright green. No one's made an error, ERAs are pristine. We're all undefeated, it's opening day. Everybody's shoulder feels okay. Legs are fresh as young ponies at play. And everyone could be MVP on opening day. The uniforms shine, grass is bright green. No one's made an error, ERAs are pristine. Pennant hopes simmer from Wrigley to Yawkey Way. If you're lucky, your grandpa will take you to opening day. Opening day, opening day. The visitors take the diamond in the traveling gray. Opening day, opening day. Single up the middle and you're batting 1,000 hooray. Start your engines up, up and away. Opening day, opening day. This is the year, it's gonna be okay. You called in sick, got you a ticket. Can't wait to see the painted line with the brick. Popcorn or peanuts, you got your choice. Scully's had 6 months to rest that golden voice. Winter coats and gloves and boots are put away. It's opening day. That rookie can be the next Willie Mays. Opening day. It's really, truly, finally here. Opening day.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Another edition of Legends Sports and Amplify, and we are talking baseball history, minor league history, Negro League history, card art, and today, a special treat. We're going to have a music contribution to all of this, and I'm really, really happy to have on today singer, songwriter, artist, baseball advocate, Dan Bern. How are you, sir?
I'm doing real good. Thanks, Philip.
All right, man. Thank you so much for taking the time. This would be a lot of fun. I was telling you before we got on here why I've enjoyed doing these and why I'm doing these to try to bring context to the recent announcements of baseball reference, Major League Baseball and the Negro Leagues, and those stories are important. I came across your music and you tie it all kind of together because there's so many different ways to tell stories, as you well know, and you've written over 1,000 songs and dozens of albums. You've been doing this for a long time, and you are a storyteller, so you know what that's all about.
Well, yeah, I grew up in Iowa. There were no major league teams, so I couldn't go watch those players that I was reading about in the newspaper. So I kind of approached it, I think, early on, kind of from a literary angle. The books I was reading, the Babe Ruth story. I was a bad kid. I say that without pride, but with the feeling that it is better to say it. That's how it started. And it was like a tornado came through. And all of the Willie Mays books and the Mantle books and the Koufax books. So I was hooked really before I ever set eyes on a major league field. And I happened to my trade is songs.
Hmm.
So it was just natural, especially once I uh, moved to Chicago and started going to Wrigley every day
I
for a good while. That I would sort of, among the other things I was doing, I was always writing baseball songs.
and you've written quite a bit of them. You have a whole entire album pretty much dedicated to baseball and baseball history. I played opening day. I love the song "Rivalry." We're gonna maybe have a little treat from you a little bit later on, and on a song. Um, one of the things that I think people enjoy hearing, and you touched on it a little bit about your background, but you have such a long career that you've been doing this, and I'm sure you've been compared over the years. I mean, your music, I mentioned to you, my brother was a big John Prine fan, when he was growing up, and the references obviously to your style of music that's similar to Bob Dylan type of music.
We're all Midwestern.
Yeah, how did you get? I mean, what's a little bit of the background on what made you get into music and that became your passion, and the telling of the stories? Because you tell stories that are pertinent. They're some of them are political. They're social. You're making statements on a lot of things that are important, and like I mentioned to you, in talking to some of these authors and historians, artists, there's different ways you can approach topics, and maybe people would be a little bit more receptive to them. So how did you get into your style and the storytelling that you do?
Well, I came to music and words naturally, I guess. My dad was a classical pianist and composer, and my mom was a poet and word person. They're both immigrants, and so it was natural to sort of take the music and the words, but I didn't have the American culture from my home, so I had to look for it other places. And baseball was one of those places that I found American culture. I'm certainly not the first to reflect that uh, American culture is mirrored in baseball,
Hmm.
pretty closely a lot of times. So maybe it was my way in to all of that.
Through all that, and then so you've been. I mean, it's from a very very young age, right? You were very young when you started playing music, right?
Well, I don't know what very young is anymore.
True, right?
I was probably 6 when I started playing the cello. I needed to find an instrument that wasn't the piano in my house, and my dad brought a cello player over one time, and I thought that's for me. It really wasn't for me, uh, although I sawed away at it for a number of years, and then but I was really a Beatles fan. But it's
Uh-huh.
hard to imagine doing the Beatles what they did if you're just one kid sitting up in
Right?
your room. But then, I heard the folks you're talking about, Dylan and Prine and Woody and Hank Williams and Lightning Hopkins and these people who could make a whole lot of sense and a whole lot of racket just by themselves. So that's when I switched to the guitar and started writing
Cool.
songs, and that's when all that started for me.
Cool. When your first album came out, was it in the early '90s or was it even before that?
I think it was '96. I had made, dozens of tapes and everything before that, but the first uh, album that felt like an album was in '96.
Boy, and you are actually on tour right now, right? I mean, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. It's really, really cool.
Oh, you have no idea. Who else would I talk to? I'm just going from place to place.
And you said Peoria, Illinois?
Yeah, this is my first time in Peoria. It feels like a joke, you know? Like, we'll see if my stuff plays here.
And
But
where
it seems like a nice town.
are you playing tonight? Where are you going to be at?
I'm playing someplace, I think it's called the Rage Club.
Cool.
It sounds pretty vicious, but I think it's on a porch to whoever's going to gather around outside.
Awesome. You're touring by yourself, or you're with anybody?
I'm right on my own right now.
Awesome. No, but you have toured in the past with some really, really interesting people. I mean, you've written movie soundtracks. You've done. I mean, your career. You're a Renaissance man. I'll tell you what.
Utility player.
You
I'm
are.
Tom Pacioric.
Yeah, Tom Pacioric. Yeah, you are. Like a Renaissance man. The artwork that you did, I mentioned to you, I had on for 9 weeks in a row. We did a card art roundtable. It was a whole new world to me. I had no idea that baseball cards were being made. I grew up not far from the Topps factory in Pennsylvania, and as
Oh,
a
wow.
kid, so I was very familiar with Topps and waiting for them to come out every year. And then, there's the bigger names that are out there, and I had no idea. There's a whole world of people out there making one-of-one card art, and I'll tell you what, some of your stuff would fit right in there. It is some awesome stuff. The artwork that you've done, especially you did. I noticed the Fernando Valenzuela in there, and some of the early Dodgers and Giants. Monty Irvin, Willie Mays. I mean, that is some good stuff, man. What's the story? I read a little bit about. You did some artwork at the hotel, the Astoria in New York. What was that all about?
It was well, it was during the U.S. Open just now, the tennis, and I had done a whole bunch of tennis portraits and a whole bunch of tennis songs. That's another one of my interests. So I got
Cool.
to present all these pictures and songs during the U.S. Open. It was nice.
Cool. Jonathan Mann, are you familiar with him? He says hello, by the way. Do you know who Jonathan Mann is?
Yeah, I know that name. Yeah.
He just recently had out, and I pinged him because I just thought it was such a cool video, and he's the one who mentioned that he's a big fan of yours. He did the song "Florida Man" about the alligator catching alligator in a can. That's him.
Right.
Did you? But his work, I mean, it blew me away when I was. He's done a song a day for like 7 years in a row or something. Now it's incredible stuff.
How
But
can
yeah,
you do that? I mean,
it's
what if you
amazing,
get
right?
sick?
Right? I mean, it's
What
an
if you have a
incredible
hangover
streak.
all day?
Right?
What do you do? I guess that's what you write about.
Oh, but that song with that video of the guy catching the alligator in the trash can is just, I mean, it's been everywhere. And so I had to ping him. And he's actually the one who said, man, I tell him that I said hello. I'm a big fan. So, yeah, sort of
Thanks.
so Jonathan Mann, the Song a Day Man, he's called, says hello.
I wonder how long he'll keep that going.
I hope for as long as he can, right? You mentioned that even earlier about the pandemic. I mentioned to you, I think that it's finally at a time where the internet is serving a purpose recently that it was maybe more intended to do, not with all the nonsense that's out there, keeping people connected. Because, if you could tell us a little bit about what you've done for the last year, because you couldn't go out and tour, and it's something that you do quite a bit of.
Yeah, so it just made you kind of switch tracks. So I started doing these live streaming shows on Facebook, and they started to become a thing, and it's called Hunkered in the Bunker. And there's the live chat, so it's pretty interactive.
Cool.
I feel like doing the shows I'm doing now live again. Having done all those, there's something that's shifted a little bit, and it feels good.
And so you prefer, you like being out doing the live shows?
I don't know that I prefer any of it, but it's real nice to be doing again. I can sort of feel how once you're doing this, it's kind of all you want to do.
I bet, right?
Yeah.
So you were shut down for how long? When did you finally
I
get back
mean,
out on the
a
road?
couple years, I guess.
Oh, wow.
a year and a half. This is the first little run that I've done since February of last year.
So where are you planning on? Where else you planning on going with
Well,
this little tour?
I was just out east. I did the kind of the eastern corridor, Maine to DC, and every place in between. I'm doing a few in the Midwest.
Cool.
Gonna after tonight, I'm gonna double back and hit Ann Arbor, Milwaukee, Madison, Minneapolis, Des Moines. Little northern Midwestern run, and then maybe some California stuff in December.
Are you going to be down here in Texas at all? Down this way? I'm in
Um,
the Houston area, by the way.
well, I've always loved playing in Texas, so maybe probably into next year, I would guess.
Cool. I would definitely come and see you and say hello. I think
All right,
that would be a lot of fun. There's
that would be nice.
several places around here. I think that you would fit right in. Certainly Austin as well. I mean, you probably played in Austin, I'm sure, before, right?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So I started telling you earlier as well why I started doing this. The Negro Leagues, for people who are not familiar with them, black baseball, simply because of the color of their skin, the racial climate of the time, until 1947, played in their own leagues. They were separate but equal, as the Supreme Court case in 1897, whatever year that was, that decided that. So not because they weren't good enough to play in Major League Baseball, but simply they were not allowed to, and they persevered. And to me, it's a great just a great American story of perseverance and overcoming and adapting and doing what you had to do. And a lot of it was kind of like what you're doing right now. They did a lot of barnstorming. They played wherever that they could, in front of crowds wherever they could find them. And people paid good money to go see them play. And they did a tremendous job that I don't know they get as much credit as they should for, of spreading that brand of baseball all around. Because as you know, baseball, until probably the 50s into the 60s, was the sport. There was no NFL as we know it. There was no NBA. Everybody played baseball. Everybody followed baseball. And some of these small towns, you're talking about Iowa, that didn't have a team close by, when these teams came to play, and many times they brought Major League Baseball or minor league caliber players that they were playing against, that was a big deal. And it got people to be able to see some pretty good baseball in their hometown that they never would have had the opportunity to go and see otherwise. So I just think it's a great story. So I wanted to put context to the recent announcements. And the music that you have, you've done 42, which I think is a fantastic song, the lyrics about Jackie Robinson, which ties into the movie. And you've also done, which I'm thinking that you mentioned that you would play, is the song Josh Gibson. And so tell us, what was your background? What did you know about the Negro Leagues, and what made you find some interest in writing some songs about them?
Well, you're always, if you're looking into the history and like reading about Babe Ruth and Ted Williams, guys like that, you're always sort of aware that there's this parallel institution called the Negro Leagues. And of course, once you're reading about Willie Mays and the fact that when he was like young and pursuing his baseball career, uh, Jackie hadn't happened yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was no uh, assurance, maybe even no thought that Hank Aaron, well, maybe Hank was a little younger, so maybe he had that notion. But I think for Mays, there was no expectation that he was going to get a crack at the major leagues, you know?
Mm-hmm.
His, maybe at that point, his goal, maybe his goal in life was to play for the Birmingham Black Barons,
Mm-hmm.
which he did, which he did. And when he started playing for the Black Barons, there was, I think at that time, still no indication that he was gonna
Mm-hmm.
be called up or sold to the Giant system, or
Mm-hmm.
where he ended up.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that was my introduction to the notion of this. Um, and then you hear about these incredible players,
Mm-hmm.
and it's mythical because there were
Yes.
no statistics kept when your Ruths and Garricks stepped on the field in these informal, undocumented settings with cool Papa Bell,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and and uh, and that ilk, Satchel Paige.
Mm-hmm.
And the stories are just unbelievable.
They are.
Satchel telling his outfielders and infielders to lie down and then striking out the side.
Yep.
And then some of it is fact, and some like maybe certain players being able to hit the bed after turning out the light
Yeah,
before it
cool
gets
Papa
dark
Bell. Yeah.
and stuff. But
Yep.
it's all incredible, and some of it is fact and myth and history, and uh,
It's part of the whole story, though. It's what gives the context to it. Without those stories being told, I've heard this from several authors and people I've talked to, some of those stories were mythologized and exaggerated, and some self-promotion maybe with some players for a reason. Otherwise, how were they ever going to get noticed? That was part of the reason why.
it was the age of vaudeville still.
Yeah, yeah, it was. And I don't know if you remember this or if they came through when you were a kid at all, but the Negro Leagues lasted, teams from the Negro Leagues lasted, some of them into the 70s, into the 80s. And when I was a kid, my dad took me to a little stadium outside of Scranton, Pennsylvania, and we actually did see the Clowns came to play. They were an offshoot. They were the Indianapolis Clowns. I don't know if they still were called Indianapolis, but at that time it was exactly what you just said. It was a show. It was more vaudeville and everything else. And I think part of what happened there is people had that in their mind that if that's what they saw, that's what that game was like. But no, these guys were good players. They came into baseball, after Jackie Robinson, and they were MVPs and All-Stars, and they won every award you can imagine. They didn't just spring out of the earth and learn how to do that. They learned it and were mentored and taught it by the players in the Negro Leagues, like you mentioned. I mean, they some of them who, without the stories being told, most people would not even know. And finally, Major League Baseball decided they were going to make that. Recognizing them, but they were major leaguers, and they should have been recognized as that all along. So I love telling these kinds of stories.
It's interesting too because you're right. They came in and they were immediately the Rookie of the Year and
Mm-hmm.
the Cy Young winner and all that. But what's also interesting is they had to be. That's the only ones they were going to take for a good long while. And your marginal player, your 12th player, wasn't one of the Negro Leaguers.
Mm-hmm.
If the ones they brought in, they were the MVPs.
That's right. Yeah, it took a little while, and you look at today, it's ludicrous to think that they weren't good enough and they weren't always there going all the way back because, granted, the racial makeup of the country today is not the same as it was 100 years ago, but there were no Latin players playing in Major League Baseball either, unless, of course, you looked white, then you were allowed to play. And so those were the same players that were playing in the pipeline from Latin America through the Negro Leagues. It's why the Dominican Republic and some of the countries that now are dominating in when it comes to Major League Baseball, the number of players that they're putting in, it all started with the Negro Leagues. And I don't think people know that connection either. Without that connection, those players never would have gotten into the pipeline in order to come into Major League Baseball. And they changed the game. You start getting into, Roberto Clemente. It's the day that he had his 3,000th hit back in 1972, and he died in a plane crash later that year. But, these guys, there's a strong connection to all of that. And I don't think people have ever really learned or understood that connection to it. And like I said, it's great to hear the stories and hear them from different perspectives. Now you put it to song like you did, which is really cool. I mean, you touch on in the 42 song, and I love the movie, by the way. It's my favorite baseball movie. I think it's taken over
really
for me. But your song touches on a lot of things that in the life of Jackie Robinson, his Army career and other things. And that's what's great about song. You can take, I think, a theme and, like I said, put it, and maybe people will be more receptive to it if they hear it. Everybody's a different learner. Some learn visually, some learn other ways, and whatever makes them click.
I wanted to learn Barry Bonds' after he took over the all-time home run.
Oh yeah.
I wanted to learn his year-by-year home run stats. I just thought, well, that would be a cool list to know. But how are you going to do that? So I put it in song, and that's how you learn a thing. So you're right. I think song does that, but it also distills information by necessity. You can have 1,000-word report and then basically convey the same thing in song, but it's got to be culled.
It's interesting, right? That's a great point. History, when I grew up, it was like, different. Math was taught differently. It was do your times tables, right? And they don't even teach them anymore these days, right? History was you were learning and you had to memorize names and dates and names and dates and names and dates, and you never really got how it all kind of fit together. So a lot of these stories that I've been able to talk with these authors and researchers about is connecting the dots. How did it all fit together? How did everything, have its place, and what affected what? There's more to history. I think if history was taught more like that, more like a song, more like, trying to tell a story as opposed to names and dates, kids might like it better.
Yeah. I think you're right. But it's also, there's so many stories, and it's like, what is the story? It's like the blind man and the elephant, you're only going to get some.
Right?
That's why you got to keep going and get the tail maybe next.
That's right. One song that you did that, boy, oh boy, when I listened to it, it brought back a lot of memories as well, too, was the Vin Scully song. Because it was a truck driver, right? And I
first teen, yeah.
Yeah, and I kept thinking, boy, oh boy, how many times I remember driving, and I lived in Pennsylvania growing up, and I lived in Virginia, so many times I would go back to visit my parents, and it was a 6-7 hour drive, and I would catch. That was how I knew kind of where I was without even knowing where I was, because you're going through the different cities' radio stations, and you're picking up the Baltimore Orioles as you're going through, and then you're picking up Philadelphia, and then you're getting a little further north. You're picking up the New York stations. It was just a great way, and so I got it when hearing about the voice of Vin Scully. You can relate to that. It was just, and that's what's great about your music. It's a lot of things that people can relate to, which is really a lot of fun.
Well, the announcers, especially the radio voices, that's really the music of the game.
Yes.
It's like listening. What we used to listen to Vin. I was living in LA for a long time, and a few times, and he was like, you would like turn him on with dinner. It'd be like listening to Thelonious Monk.
Right?
It's just music. Sometimes you're listening to what's happening. Sometimes it's just the lilt. Harry Carey, same thing.
Yep, I grew up listening to Richie Ashburn and Harry Callis on a little transistor radio that was like 6 inches tall, shaped like a baseball player in a Phillies uniform, and the battery hatch was broken off. It was taped on, but every night I would turn that thing on as a kid growing up and listen to a Phillies game, and it just was part of life. And it
brings you to the city.
Yeah.
If you're not in the city, you become like a city person for that little bit.
It is, and that's I said. You've obviously written so many songs that have to do with other topics, but your baseball ones are brilliant, man. I think that they're all brilliant, but as a baseball fan and what I'm trying to convey with this little live stream is how all of what passions people have for the sport, because baseball is one of these sports that it's had a connection to the country for a long time, longer than any other sport, and it's people mark their lives sometimes by when was the last time the Cleveland Indians won a World Series and those kinds of things. I mean, it's a big deal. Now, today there's so many other sports and other things you can get into, but baseball has had a hold on the country for a long time. I don't know if it's losing it. What's your thoughts on that? I'm not sure. Recent baseball, it's different than it was in the past.
Well, yeah, I mean, for sure. It's in a lot of ways, it has its roots in the 19th century, not even the 20th, the 19th century. It's a real pastoral kind of game. I think it's a really democratic game.
Right.
In basketball, you can just throw it to Wilt every time. In football, you can just give it to Jimmy Brown every time, or have Brady throw to Gronk every time. But in baseball, I mean, even Ohtani, who, because of his double whammy, can dominate maybe as nobody has in a long time. Even he can only bat once every 9 times. They can't send him up 3 times an inning. We're going to bat Ohtani again. You can't do that. It's like...
Right. That's a great point.
Maybe that's one reason why there's just so much competition. That's just the fact of it. There's just so many other things, and some are other sports, and some are sports that only exist on screens, and so on. But I think it's a little like I'm rediscovering right now what it's like to play live and having that kind of connection. And I think baseball will continue to live and thrive because there's still nothing that can top.
I think the beauty of a baseball game to me is it's over when both teams decide it's over. I mean, there's no clock, there's no milking the clock, there's no calling. I mean, you call timeouts, but visit the mound or whatever. But until you get that 27th out, it's not over, and that's to me is like as fair as it gets. You have to make it over as the other team, and it's really great. And like you pointed out, from a democratic standpoint, size-wise, sure, it always helps to be the best athletically, but you don't necessarily have to be in baseball as opposed to some other sports. Sometimes you tend to have height or size or whatever. Baseball is it's fair, and you need everybody, and it's baseball is a marathon. I mean, that's 162 games. You can't get too excited in June. It's just you wrote. I mean, as a trainer.
Can I tell you my 2? Everybody always wants to fix the game, right?
Yeah.
So here's my 2 improvements.
Okay.
For Major League Baseball. One has to do with pitching, one has to do with hitting. And I'm not gonna legislate where anybody can stand or any of that. It's very simple. Your starting pitcher has to go 6. Instead of boom boom boom, instead of 5 guys throwing 100 miles an hour, you gotta so you're not gonna throw 100.
You gotta pace yourself.
So your starting pitcher's gotta go 6. If you take him out before 6, it'll cost you 3 runs. And then after he comes out after 6, you got 2 more pitchers to finish the game. So one can go 8, one can go 1, however you want to do it. So that's one thing. The other thing is, this is my own little radical twist. Every other at bat, you gotta switch hit. So if you're up this time righty, your next time's lefty, and so on.
That would make it a challenge, huh? Yeah. Well, baseball used to be back in the day. Pitchers started what they finished. That's the thing about the Negro Leagues that we've been talking about. They had much smaller rosters, so many of those guys they were Ohtani before Ohtani. Long before him, there was Bullet Joe Rogan and many of the players who were Leon Day. There were two-way players batting third or fourth and playing center field when they weren't pitching. So that was a common occurrence because they didn't have as many men on the roster, and so the pitcher had to go 9 innings, sometimes more than that. I mean, so it was a different game certainly than it is today.
What was the typical traveling roster for the Crawford to the grave?
It depends on the era. In the early days, probably in the 30s, it was probably 15 max, probably even less than that. So yes, you carried 4 pitchers, but everybody could pitch if they needed them to. Because remember what they were doing here, right? There was everybody, when they made the announcement saying that the Negro Leagues were going to be considered major leagues, everybody wanted to see 162 game schedules and statistics and all these crazy metrics. That's not there yet. I mean, they're still working on it. There's much of it has been compiled, but it's still a work in process. But it didn't work that way. Some of the teams played 70, 80 games during the season, league games. Some played much less, depending on where they were, what were the travel, limitations, where could they go, not go. And then in between, as they were traveling, they were playing all week, all along that route. So if they were going from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh, they, most of the time by train, they were playing probably at a dozen stops along the way before they got there. So it was a different game than it was today. It's not like
hat, right?
I'm not sure. I'm sure they did many, many times. They had gate receipts and they would split it up. That was a whole other thing too. They did it. Why? Because they made they made money. Even through the Depression and World Wars and everything else, that was a way to make some money, and that's really what it comes down to in any profession, right? You got to pay the bills. So if you could stop in Des Moines and play a barnstorming game on your way from Chicago to Kansas City, you did, So yeah, it was a different game, and in some ways a lot more fun, a lot more accessible. People got to see these guys day in, day out. And like I said, many times they were playing against former major league players in the off season. This was not, sure, they were playing the local firehouse team too, but this was good baseball, and they were good at it. So what else you working on now? Are you working on any albums? You just concentrating on touring, or what are you up to now?
I have a few projects going at any one time. I'm just released I think there's 2 episodes up so far. The second season of my 10,000 Crappy Songs and Other Tales of Detective Stories in podcast form.
Awesome.
Yeah.
10,000 Crappy Songs. Is that the real title?
That's the title. It's a detective who had been a songwriter and wrote, by his estimation, 10,000 crappy songs, and then decided to become a detective.
Awesome.
And in solving his cases, he's not very happy about it, but he has to write a song in the solving of each case. It just happens to be that way.
And it's a podcast? Where can you find that one? Where can you find it?
I think wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay. All right.
Just go to the podcast thing and Apple Podcasts or whatever and type in 10,000 Crappy and it should come up.
10,000 Crappy. Absolutely. I will definitely check it out for sure.
I just wrote season. I've been contributing a lot of songs to the Tony Kornheiser show. Do you know?
Yes.
Podcast?
Yes.
Everybody knows Tony.
Yeah.
And he has a podcast, and every day they play a couple of people's original songs.
Awesome.
And so I started sending him all these sports songs and then songs about the show itself. And I've sort of woven it into season 3 of the 10,000 Crappy Songs thing, but
Awesome.
that's later.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Are you planning on doing any albums or anything else in the future, or you gonna concentrate on
Um,
this kind of stuff for a while?
well, I got, yeah, I got those in the works too.
What's the? I lost count in trying to count how many you've done. It's dozens,
I did
dozens of
two, actually.
two.
No, I lost count as
You
well.
oh you lost count too? Yeah, I was counting down that list, and I'm sure it wasn't even a comprehensive list. You're probably even more than that, and I was like, unbelievable. It's mind-boggling. Like I said, I don't want people to miss this part too. You write the songs, you sing, you play the guitar, but you do the artwork. You are involved in it from start to finish on everything. And I tell you what, hats off to you, man. That is just incredible. Was there a story? And when I mentioned that I was going to be talking to my brother, he said, I know him. He heard you on NPR several years back. He knew the name, and he remembered because I told you he's a John Prine fan, and it stuck in his mind. But was there something that a story that something happened to you where, like the Bill Buckner
What's wrong
moment,
with you?
the
I'm sorry, what?
the Bill Buckner moment? Like, was there something that happened to you in the recent past that you kind of had one of those life flashing before your eyes moments? There was a story, something about something with a snowblower.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, that was jarring for sure.
I bet.
Yeah, I stuck I got these stubby fingers now because I stuck
Wow.
them in a snowblower. We were living out
Oh
in
my
upstate New
goodness.
York for a couple of years, and it was jammed, and I thought, well, I'm jamming. It went, and so they went.
Oh,
Um, yeah, there was that moment where I didn't know if I'd play guitar anymore.
I bet.
So that was super scary. Just and there was some time where probably 4 or 5 months where I couldn't play the guitar. Um, but I started playing the piano, and now I love the piano as much as anything. So it was kind of a silver lining, and I think it made me appreciate just getting to
You're
do this.
I bet, right? I mean, like I said, I mentioned this earlier. I mean, you're a storyteller. You tell a lot. You talk about a lot of pertinent issues, things of the day, social, political. But the other thing that I mentioned too about this the song with the truck driver and that song that you did with your daughter about it just reminded me of growing up and hearing the stories as a kid and how you process them and so you besides being the storyteller, your music is very relatable. I mean, it's something that I think a lot of people can listen to, and they can hear the theme, and they can relate it to a lot of things that they probably had happen to them in their life, and it's very, very cool.
No, that's great. Thanks.
All right, so you are gonna maybe play us a tune
Yeah.
as we. I mean, that is fantastic. I appreciate that. So this is off that same album as well. Is this on Rivalry as well?
This is on Rivalry. Yeah. The
Okay,
first one I did that was all baseball was called Doubleheader,
doubleheader.
and that, like it says, it's 18 songs. And then Rivalry was like the newer edition with new songs that we did put out last year.
So this is your song, Josh Gibson, which when I heard it, I just in hearing all the stories recently in the last year or two, I could definitely relate to it for sure. So
All right.
here's Dan Bern with Josh Gibson.
Yeah, before old Henry Aaron, before old Willie Mays, brown-skinned man hit homers over any wall they could raise. Yeah, for old Jackie Robinson before Yasiel Puig, but he never made it out of the Negro Leagues. Josh Gibson, they called you the Black Babe Ruth, but those who saw you play called Babe Ruth White Josh Gibson. You never made the majors, but in the hall your name lives on. Ooh, Josh Gibson. Played with the Pittsburgh Crawfords, played with the Homestead Grays. In the Negro League you had no peer, it was you and Satchel Paige. 12 weeks before Jackie at 35 years of age, they laid you down in Pittsburgh in an unmarked grave. And Josh Gibson, they called you the Black Babe Ruth. Those who saw you play called Babe Ruth the White Josh Gibson. You never made the hall, never made the majors, but in the hall your name lives on. Josh Gibson, the only man to hit a ball out of Yankee Stadium, the only one. His plaque over at the Hall of Fame claims 800 home runs, made you into a postage stamp, 33-cent one. Jackie was the first one, Josh Gibson was the best. Say he was a broken heart exploding in his chest. And oh, Josh Gibson, called you the Black Babe Ruth. Those who saw you play called Babe Ruth the White Josh Gibson. Never made the majors, but in the hall your name lives on. Josh Gibson. Josh Gibson.
All right, man. Thank you so much. That was awesome. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, like I said, I appreciate your work, the passion you put into it, telling the stories, not just the baseball ones. I mean, I'm with you when it comes to all of the other content, social stories, the telling the songs of the country, really. It's just hats off to you. I think it's fantastic. I'm glad I found you. Thank you for taking the time to come on here and do this today. This was great.
Well, thanks for what you're doing. I really appreciate it. It's great to talk to you. When I come through Houston, I'd love to
Absolutely.
You come hear more because I just want to ask you stuff, really.
Cool. Before you go, you mentioned you went to the museum in Kansas City. You've been there?
Yeah.
Did you get to meet Bob Kendrick?
I don't think so. I was with. I don't think so.
How long ago was that you were there?
I think it was in the mid-teens, early mid-teens. So, what, 7, 8 years ago, I would say.
Cool. Well, there are so many cool stories to tell about the Negro Leagues. I'm like I said, I'm trying to raise that visibility and hopefully put people who are telling these stories back in front so people can, and to a newer generation, a younger generation who maybe has never heard any of this, and maybe they might know a little bit. They might have heard about Satchel Paige, maybe, maybe Jackie Robinson, maybe.
The museum is so great. The most vivid thing for me that they had a couple facsimiles of little hotel rooms that the players might have stayed in, and their the little stand for their suitcase and the little dresser and I don't know what it was, but it just made, I felt like somebody was actually staying there and they were going to go out and play a game, and it really brought it to life.
It did. That's part of what I would encourage anybody who is near there, to go check it out. It is worth the experience. And most of the time, Bob or Kiana Sinks, who works with Bob, are there. They will take you through and give you whatever information that you need. I mean, it's a great experience. So I do encourage it. And again, thank you for your time. Best of luck. Stay safe. Everything, in your travels out there. And like I said, yeah, I think that'd be great. If you anywhere you come in Texas, I'll come see you. Austin's not that far away. If you're down this way, Dallas, a couple hours. So yeah, I'd like to keep in touch, man.
All right, thanks, Philip.
Thank you. I appreciate it.